All righty. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the NMAR QB Power Hour, as opposed to the lack of power hour that we had last week, thanks to that nationwide Zoom outage. My name's Rob Wigton. I am your new CEO here at NMAR. Been here for about 5 months now, and so happy to be here. Uh, in a nutshell, I've been an AE CEO for 16 years. Prior to that, I was one of you. I come from your world. I owned and or co-owned and managed a 50-person real estate firm in Northern Nevada and loved those days, but I appreciate what I'm doing now and especially appreciate being here in New Mexico with the fine staff that I have here at NMAR. I do want to make mention of them right now. I think most of you know Kim Garcia, who is our operations director, Amberly Mastis, who is our membership director, Amanda McFadden doing a great job with forms with Ashley, who you'll hear from later on. Our newest member is Ari Bransford Kinzer. She is our communications and marketing director who we hired, and she started 2 weeks ago. She hit the ground running. We're going to see lots of good things. She's already revamping and improving our website, and you'll be noticing an uptick in member communications. Also, of course, David, you're going to be hearing from David Severdor shortly. And Pat Pacheco is in accounts here. Adrian's our accountant. And of course, Ashley Strauss Martin, our general counsel. So just a terrific staff here at NMAR. Not a large staff, but boy, do they work hard and get things done for you. And I come here with a pillar of positivity. It's one thing there's so much drama and negativity in the world these days that I really wanted to focus on us going forward, getting positive, forgetting about the past and moving in a good new direction. So I hope you're all in there with me on that one. And what's happening at NMAR? Well, we've got some big stuff coming up in the future. I hope you can all attend or try to attend the annual conference in Ruidoso. That's August 20th through the 22nd. And boy, we'd really appreciate you all attending, taking part in the fine educational opportunities and motivational opportunities there, as well as the networking. Also, we've got coming up, and I could use your help here, the 2025 Growth and Involvement Program. And we are accepting applications for that right now. I think we've had about 13 people apply, but there's room for more. And if any of you are interested or your brokers in your office, please have them apply, and we'd love to see them. The first session is going to be happening in Farmington, June 12th and 13th, and we've got Evan Fuchs coming in to lead a really good session on leadership. So we'd really love to see you there. Other than that, we are just hoping that you'll join us. Take advantage of what we have to offer. Call us. Our doors are always open. We'd love to help you with anything. Our focus is on customer service here. So give any one of us a call at any time. And at this point, the man who brought us a great new theme this year to educate and engage and empower all of you out there, I'm going to introduce our president, our NMAR president for 2025, Mr. Dan Coleman. Dan?
Thank you very much, Rob. I appreciate the introduction. I do want to say that we are very happy to have Rob on board. He's been a good addition to our team. It's nice to have leadership there in the office and a person that our staff can answer to and can go to and can get support from. So we're very happy about that. It's been a nice addition. We do have some new employees in the office, and so that's been fun. And it's just really a team building process, and so that's very exciting. I am super excited to be working with your NMAR leadership team this year. Lois Surrey, of course, is our president-elect. Amparo Usre is our first vice president. Todd Clark is our treasurer. Our immediate past president, of course, is Miss Colleen Deering. And then our DVPs are Sherry Fowler, Clay Azar, Andrea Dobbins, Paul Berry, Wes Graham, and Emery Simpson. And I will tell you that each one of us takes NMAR leadership very seriously. We have meetings and we talk about what does it need what needs to happen to move this association forward? How can we better serve our members? How can we make our value more valuable to our members? And so we're very conscientious about the money that we spend, the decisions that we make, and how it all affects the 7,500 members in the state of New Mexico. We are representing all of you. We were all elected and voted in to represent you, and that is something that we take very seriously. And so it is important that we educate, that we engage, and that we empower, because each of the 7,500 members is an owner of this thing, and they all need to have information and knowledge about what this thing is, and they need to help guide the direction of where we go. So it is very important, and we understand that, and we really do stand by that. And so just know that we are here for you, and any of our doors are open. If there's anything that needs to be said, any ideas, any questions, we are here to represent you. And we thank you for the trust that you place in us. We really don't take that lightly. We do have NMAR officer applications coming up. The applications are being accepted now. Up for grabs, so to speak, is the first vice president. There are a couple of district vice presidents for the commercial Northwest and Southeast districts. There are a couple of individual directors and an NAR director. Now, you guys, the clock is ticking on this because those applications have to be received by the NMAR office no later than May 15th at 5 p.m. So if you're interested or know somebody who is, please jump on the stick and get those applications in. We also have nominations open for the 2025 New Mexico Realtor of the Year, who will be recognized at our annual conference. So please get those in. If you know somebody that represents the best of the best, somebody that really embodies all that we are as realtors, get those nominations in, please. Fair Housing Month is April, which is almost past. There are lots of opportunities to become better engaged with fair housing. If you have not done the original Fair Haven, by all means do. If you have, don't worry, there's still something for you. There's Fair Haven 2.0. And these are little courses that you do online at Home with Diversity as well. And it's amazing because, you don't think that you have any kind of bias at all whatsoever, right? But then you go through this and then you realize that maybe you didn't quite know as much as you thought you knew, or maybe you have a little room for improvement. And let's face it, we should always be growing and we should always be improving. So if you have not gone through any of these diversity Fair Haven type courses, I encourage you to, and encourage you to encourage your associates to do so as well. Code of Ethics Cycle 8. So you all know that there's been some changes with NAR and the Code of Ethics. They do require that every realtor take the Code of Ethics once every 3-year cycle. We are in a new cycle. So even if you took it in December, that was for last cycle. So sometime in 25, 26, and 27 in cycle 8, you must all take the Code of Ethics. So be sure that you do, and realize that it's not necessarily the same as the Code of Ethics for your licensing with the New Mexico Real Estate Commission. They are actually two different things in most cases. There are a few courses that will satisfy both, but not many. So just be aware, know what you're doing, and make sure that you have covered your bases. And that's my part. And thank you guys for being here again.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Hello, everyone. For those of you that I don't know, my name is David Saavedra, and I am the Government Affairs Director for NMAR. I've been here about 3 years now, and this was a fun session, and I'm looking forward to giving you a little bit of a legislative update. So we're going to talk a little bit about the impacts on real estate and the key outcomes of the session. So thank you for allowing me to be here. And I do want to mention, if you all have any questions throughout any of the QB Power Hour, please put those in the chat, because this is an hour session. We're going to address those at the end, but we'll definitely get to your questions. So with that, let's dive right in. As a quick reminder, we do have today's notes available for you, so you don't need to write anything down. We did the work for you. So if you just text Power Hour, all one word, to our office number, 505-982-2442, this will actually get you to subscribe to our text messages from the association. So you'll receive your updates via text, but you'll also get a text message of all the notes from today's session and all of the PowerPoints and slides. This year was a 60-day session. We are in the 57th legislature for the state of New Mexico, and bills were able to be pre-filed in a time window of January 2nd to the 21st. We had about 350 bills that were pre-filed before session, ready to go for the legislature to get working on. And the session actually started on January 21st at around noon. That's when both the House and the Senate gavelled in. Again, it was a 60-day session, so any topic germane to the session, so legislators could bring any idea that they want to address to this legislature. In the corresponding years, the 30-day sessions, that's only limited to the budget and to topics considered germane by the governor. So we saw topics ranging, across the gamut this year. Definitely housing was a big priority, and we'll talk a little bit about that. This legislature is comprised of 112 members. It's standard for our legislature. 70 of those members are in the House of Representatives, 44 of them being Democrats and 26 being Republicans. And in the Senate, comprised of 42 members, 26 are Democrats and 16 are Republicans. We had a very large freshman class this legislature. New Mexico is unique in that every 4 years, our entire legislature turns over. All 112 seats are up for election. And so we had a very large class. About a third of our legislature was new. And so that gave new legislators not a lot of time to understand the process, find their office, and get things going. So this was a very unique year for us in that we had so many fresh faces on both the House and Senate side. Once the session gavelled in, the sessions are typically started with the State of the State address, of course, delivered by our governor, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. And she talked about economic growth and job creation, education investments, public safety and child welfare, clean energy and climate initiatives, and of course, housing and real estate focus was a major within her address. Within the housing initiative, she did go over a couple of different things that she would like to see from the legislature throughout the session. And of course, the State of the State address is not a mandate, but it's a list of requests that the executive would like to see. And she wanted to see regulatory reforms for home construction. She wanted to see some funding for homelessness services. In her executive budget proposal, she requested $50 million for this initiative. And of course, the statewide Office of Housing. This was not a new request. We saw this request last year as well. It didn't happen in the last legislative session, and it actually didn't happen in this session either. So she didn't get that statewide Office of Housing, but it was something that she really did ask for. She did talk about economic growth. She highlighted her term as governor and the jobs that were created. She talked about wage growth outpacing other states and investments in advanced manufacturing and renewable energy. And through that, so within the legislative session, a total of 1,328 individual pieces of legislation were introduced. 1,128 of those were bills, and the bills could create new laws, amend past laws, or repeal any current law as well. 102 of them were memorials, and memorials is where the legislature requests another body of government to do something. So say the Economic Development Department, it's the intent for another body of government to do something. And then 44 resolutions, which is not necessarily a mandate by the legislature, but a declaration of intent. All in all, a total of 194 bills were passed by the legislature this session, and 52 memorials and resolutions were approved by the legislature. So what did NMAR do? NMAR reviews all legislation that is brought up during the session and sees the impact to real estate and housing, of course. And spoiler alert, housing is connected to just about everything. So we reviewed many bills and certainly applaud our legislative committee staff, our lobbyists, for getting through the session. We reviewed many bills, and we ultimately took some positions. NMAR may take the position to support a bill where we stand up and help that bill get through the process and hopefully over the finish line. We can oppose the bill where we would like to stop it in its tracks or, of course, help advise and make the bill better, but we're certainly standing in opposition. And then another category, which is to monitor the bill, where we know that there's an impact. We're not necessarily for it, we're not necessarily against it, and we largely work a lot of these bills in the monitor category to hopefully get to the support category. We tracked a record-breaking 94 pieces of legislation relating to real estate this year, typically in a 60-day session. Historically, we've tracked about 50. So this was a large increase for us. 90 of them were bills on property rights, housing, and real estate. 2 of them were memorials on industry concerns, and 2 were joint resolutions with long-term effects on the industry. So some of the bills that passed this legislative session that we helped to pass by supporting them, House Bill 47, which is the veteran property tax exemptions. This is not the first time we're seeing this. This was actually introduced a couple of sessions ago, was passed, and actually went to the voters for approval. So you all actually voted on this in the last general election. This year, House Bill 47 included some language to clean up, apologies, to clean up some language and make everything a little bit more clear. So that's what House Bill 47 did this year. Senate Bill 169, Strategic Economic Development Site Readiness. This is a really awesome bill that is going to help the state say that we're open for business. This allows the Economic Development Department to find sites and get them ready for businesses to come to New Mexico with the implementation of infrastructure. This bill did have an appropriation in it, so funding is available through the Economic Development Department to help sites get ready for businesses across the state. This was a department bill, so the Economic Development Department put this forward, and this is going to be a great one for business across New Mexico. Senate Bill 72, the Nonprofit Condo Association Remote Business. This bill allows the nonprofit condo associations to conduct business over Zoom. Believe it or not, they were having to meet in person when the language was cleaned up for the non-nonprofit condo associations. It was not updated in this section, so this was largely a cleanup. Senate Bill 33, Wildfire Preparedness Act, another appropriation bill that helps individuals who have lost their homes due to wildfire. Of course, this is something that has impacted our state and continues to impact the states across the West. So this is a new funding source for individuals and communities to be able to tap into. House Bill 571 is the Building Housing Communities. This bill was pocket vetoed, so the governor did not act on it, and so it was not signed into law, but it did pass the process when it was sent to her. The bill would have created the bill would have allowed for municipalities to be starred as a building housing community and would allow them access to some federal funds. And largely what they would have to do to earn this would be to update their zoning codes and things like that. So again, the bill was pocket vetoed. This is not law, but it was passed by the legislature. So we will likely see this bill come back up again. House Memorial 52, short-term rental work group. Again, some issues with short-term rentals that we have been engaged with, industry has been engaged with. This memorial will create a work group in the interim to work together to be able to propose some initiatives and potential legislation in future legislative sessions to address short-term rentals. As many of you may know, many of the assessors are reclassifying properties that are being listed as short-term rentals from the residential category to the non-residential category for taxation purposes. So these homeowners are losing their 3% cap. So that is one of the many issues that will be discussed by this task force. So definitely good work will be coming out of that in the near future. Another one is Senate Bill 320, Mobile Home Replacement Initiatives. This is a fund that is housed under the New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority, also known as Housing New Mexico. And it allows in northern New Mexico for manufactured homes to be replaced if they are of a certain age or, people are aging in place, things like that. So it's a funding source that is available under the Mortgage Finance Authority. Another one is Senate Bill 422, Affordable Housing Organization Support. Again, an appropriation that was included in the budget bill to help with affordable housing across New Mexico. And similarly, Senate Bill 232 was specifically for affordable housing in the Albuquerque area. This bill did suffer a line item veto, so the funding is still available for affordable housing. However, it's not specific to the Albuquerque area any longer. It's just one large pool of funding that kind of combines with the funding from the bill above. There was one bill that we opposed this year that made it through the process, and it's Senate Bill 21, Pollutant Discharge Elimination Systems Act. This is a very large water bill relating to natural resources, stemmed from a Supreme Court case at the national level. We opposed this bill because we were concerned about the impact to development. The bill was heavily amended throughout the entire process in committees on the Senate side. On the Senate floor, it had about 4 or 5 amendments. And on the House side, it continued to be amended. This bill had the most committee hearings of any bill in the legislative session. Ultimately, it passed out. We were still concerned about the potential impact to development, but this one is one that got through the process, and we will continue to monitor that and see how implementation goes, and if any additional legislation is necessary to address our concerns. We monitored some bills, so these are bills that we weren't necessarily standing up and supporting, we were standing up and opposing. But Senate Bill 31, zero interest natural disaster loans. So many of our areas in New Mexico are impacted by natural disasters. This is a new funding allocation where municipalities can apply for funding. Senate Bill 267, these are housing application fees. This is largely labeled as a junk fee bill. So landlords have to, let me pull up my notes on this one because this one is actually quite important. This one amends the Uniform Owner Resident Relations Act. It requires landlords to disclose all rental related fees up front, and it limits application screening fees to $50 and imposing refund requirements in certain cases. And it does set caps and standards on late fees. So definitely check out Senate Bill 276. We're going to do a more in-depth dive on this one because it does really relate to many of our members. A land grant bill was passed through the session. We monitored that one. And House Bill 453, the Housing Creditworthiness Assistance Program. This is a new source of funding also under the New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority, Housing New Mexico, that helps individuals who might not have a credit score that allows them to housing. But this is a pool of money that the applicant can receive to help pay landlords if the property is damaged throughout the process or something like that. So it's a great program. MFA will manage the entire process and they will put together all the guidelines for this. The legislation didn't make it through, but the funding was included in the budget. So MFA will have the authority over these. Let's see here. Went all the way to slide 1. Let me get to where I was. Some notable legislation that did not make it through the process. As I mentioned earlier, the State Office of Housing, Planning, and Production, this was one of the governor's priorities. This bill did not make it through the process, made it very far, but there was some concern that some efforts would be duplicated that the Mortgage Finance Authority is already doing. We also saw quite a few squatting bills that were bipartisan in nature and bicameral. So they were introduced in both the House and the Senate side. They had sponsors that were Democrats and Republicans. One of them got a hearing, but none of them moved forward. Squatting is definitely an issue that we see across the state, and so we will see more legislation in future years. House Bill 325, Housing Construction Tax Credit. This was labeled as one of the best housing bills this legislative session. It got a hearing in House Tax and passed out, but we never heard anything about it again. So this will be something that is going to continue to be a conversation, trying to address the cost of housing to get shovels in the ground and more units to address our affordability and availability crisis across the state, which is not just affecting New Mexico, it's affecting all of the United States. House Bill 342 was an amendment for property tax changes. This was largely to the commercial side of things. It was the 12 over 12, where there was a cap on property taxes at 12% over 12 years. This didn't make it through the process. We'll continue to do some work on this, but we were one of the stakeholders that was working on this, a part of the industry, to have our voice heard there. Some bills that we monitored, the Paid Family Medical Leave Act, that bill has been introduced a number of times. It did not make it. House Bill 215, no use of AI for rent manipulation. We saw a couple of bills regarding AI this year as it's becoming more prevalent in our society. This one specifically impacting the housing industry. House Bill 502, acequia and water rights as material facts. This would require our real estate brokers to disclose any acequias and water rights. We were involved in this process. Of course, Ashley provided some feedback to the sponsors, and but this bill did not make it. It was pulled from an agenda because the sponsor did not have all of the details that were necessary for the bill. And then last one on this list is Senate Bill 446. This is an interesting bill researching zoning matter speakers. So this bill would have required a department at the University of New Mexico to make a list of everyone who speaks out at zoning issues, at zoning hearings in the Santa Fe and Albuquerque markets. It was an interesting bill. We didn't get much more feedback apart from that, but this one did not make it a part of the process. If that comes back up, we'll definitely do some more digging to see what the intent is with that. Some legislation that we helped to stop. So as important as it is to advocate for policies that are good for the industry, it's really important for us to voice our concerns on bills that would be negative for the industry. So House Bill 98, automatic expungement of eviction records. This would have allowed for eviction records to be expunged after 3 years, and landlords would not have access to those records. Another interesting bill was House Bill 100. This would allow attorneys and contractors to be property managers. So an additional carve out outside of the real estate commission's process and the regulation that we already have intact. Another one, Senate Bill 77. This was the real estate bill heard around the state. This was the purchase of single family homes. And this would have disallowed any sort of company or corporation, including LLCs, from purchasing single family homes. We advised on this bill and let the sponsors know that there are many LLCs that are purchasing properties individually, and the sponsor did let us know that his intent was not to exclude all of those individuals and companies here in New Mexico, but was really focusing on the hedge funds and out-of-state investors. But this bill did not move forward. And of course, Senate Bill 216, which is relating to rent control and certain entities. This bill would not have allowed rent control, but it would have allowed municipalities to enact rent control if they would have liked to. So it would have rescinded our statewide prohibition on rent control. But thankfully, that did not make it through the process. House Bill 2 is the state budget. It was a total of $10.8 billion, or 6% up from the prior year. There were some key allocations, specifically in the housing and homelessness area. $110 million for affordable and transitional housing, $5 million for encampment response, and $36.8 million for housing capacity building. So those are the allocations within the budget that we will see in the fiscal year. Well, we did see a tax package. We didn't know if it was going to be available. At the last minute, within the last week, one was put together that totaled about $113 million to be funded from reserves is officially what they landed on. But the bill was vetoed. So it's not something that we have to look for. There was nothing even relating to housing or real estate included in this bill, but it was vetoed, so the bill is not law. The session ended on March 22nd, where the legislature adjourned sine die, and the governor's deadline to sign bills or not sign them was April 11th. There is the potential for a special session on public safety. That's if you've been reading the newspaper or seeing the news, there has been some tension between the legislature and the executive, but nothing has been called yet. Another topic that may be called a special session for is if there are any federal cuts to the state budget. The state legislature will need to figure out how to fund those gaps. And so what's next? NMAR will continue our advocacy, monitoring regulations and future legislative developments. The interim committees will begin their work here pretty soon, so we'll be involved in that process. I mentioned House Memorial 52 relating to short-term rentals, and our legislative committee will be working on our legislative priorities for 2026. In addition, we will be working with the Real Estate Commission. We know there are some issues there, and we'll continue to engage on that level. I did just want to touch really quickly about our state political coordinator program. This is where we pair a Realtor member with a member of the legislature. It's a fantastic program. If you're interested in serving as an expert to a legislator within the state, please reach out to me, send me an email. We'll get you signed up. Great program. We're lifting it off the ground. We have about 77 SPCs. We need 112 to get everyone covered. So if you're interested, please do let me know. And I did just want to make everyone aware about our Issues Advocacy Fund. This is NMAR supporting our local associations and our municipalities across the state. If your city, township, county is introducing any type of legislation that you either want to support or oppose, we have a fund available for that. Get in contact with us and we will certainly help you throughout that process. I'll leave you with this. A single conversation with a lawmaker, whether it's a state lawmaker, federal lawmaker, or a local lawmaker, can echo through generations of homeowners, and that is the power of realtor advocacy. So it is so important for our voice to be heard and for us to be at the table. And with that, I will pass it over to Ashley for her legal update.
Thank you, David. Let me share my screen. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today and for your patience last week. Greatly appreciated. I'm Ashley Strauss Martin, General Counsel for the New Mexico Association of Realtors, as you guys probably know. And we have about 30 minutes. I don't know if I'll have any time for questions. We'll see how this goes. So the topics we're going to cover today, NAR's new MLS policy, Zillow's response to that policy, which is not exactly clear, but I think we have a better understanding now than we did when it first came out. There's an update on the beneficial ownership reporting requirement under FinCEN that I've been talking about for a couple of years now. Independent contractor update based on some new regulations at the federal level. Independent consideration, which is something that we are attacking at the forms level. So I want to introduce you to that. And then I just want to make a couple comments about irrigation wells and also a couple of bills that David touched on. So let's get started. So these new MLS policies, where did they come from? Well, they kind of came from the Clear Cooperation policy, which we all know has been around for a number of years now. So Clear Cooperation says that within one business day of doing any public marketing, the property has to be available in the MLS. Last year, the Department of Justice reopened its investigation into the NAR policies. As you all know, there was a settlement agreement in place with the DOJ that went back a few years when there was a change in the administration, not this last administration, but the one before. The administration tried to back out of that settlement agreement with NAR. NAR filed a lawsuit to enforce that settlement agreement, and the lower court agreed with NAR and told DOJ they had settled their disputes and their issues with NAR and they needed to back off. But the DOJ appealed that decision, and when they appealed it, the appellate court actually found in favor of the DOJ and basically opened it up for the DOJ to investigate NAR policies, any and all NAR policies, and basically said you don't have to adhere to the settlement agreement you entered into. So one of the policies that the DOJ was concerned about was Clear Cooperation. And so as a result of that, NAR did take a look at Clear Cooperation and was in the process of deciding whether or not they were going to keep it or they were not going to keep it, because there had been some challenges in the courts to Clear Cooperation. DOJ had made it clear that they had some concerns about Clear Cooperation. So they were analyzing Clear Cooperation, trying to decide what to do with it. What they ultimately decided to do was to keep Clear Cooperation. Sorry, here for some reason, it's not moving forward. They decided to keep the Clear Cooperation in place. So again, Clear Cooperation is still in place. And again, what that means is that within one day of doing any public marketing of a listing, you have to have it in the MLS. So public marketing being, as we know, a sign in the front yard, putting it on any kind of social media, those kind of things will trigger the requirement for it to go in the MLS if it's not yet in the MLS. So clear cooperation remains in place. They decided that they weren't going to do anything with clear cooperation. But they did, however, decide to create some an additional kind of level for multiple listing for sellers to opt in to certain multiple listing options. And this new multiple listing options for sellers introduces a new category of listings called delayed marketing exempt listings. So the new policy will exist, like I said, in conjunction with clear cooperation and other MLS policy. It's not taking the place of clear cooperation. It became effective on March 25th, but it must be implemented by the MLSs by September 30th. So there's a time frame, and different MLSs will be implementing at different times. So your particular MLS, you'll need to stay in touch with them, watch for any notifications that they send out, letting you know when they have actually implemented the multiple listing options for seller. Interestingly enough, I just found out today that California Association of Realtors, even though this is a mandatory requirement from NAR, is actually decided they are not going to participate in this new multiple listing options for sellers for various reasons. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out between NAR and the California Association of Realtors, because they feel like their current rules in the MLS actually address it sufficiently enough that they don't have to agree or opt into this particular provision of NAR. But again, it's a requirement. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm sure before any of the smaller MLSs decide to take a position other than we're just going to implement it, right? So what is the multiple listing option for sellers? So the exemption will allow a seller the option to instruct the listing broker to delay marketing a listing through the internet data field, or the IDX, or syndication. So in other words, if the seller opts for this, it will go into the MLS, the listing will go into the MLS, and it will be available to all of the brokers, all the subscribers and participants within the MLS. However, it will not be sent out via IDX, which means it's not going to be sent out to all of the brokers' websites for publication on all of the websites. And it also will not be syndicated, so it's not going to go to public-facing websites such as Zillow and Trulia and Redfin and all of these other public-facing websites. You will not see them on there. So it will be, again, available to everybody in the MLS, but not being sent out to public-facing websites. Each MLS will have the discretion to determine a delayed marketing period. So the question of, well, how long can it remain in this delayed marketing status is going to be determined by the individual MLS. And so that's very important if you guys are members of various MLSs, because each MLS will make their own determination of this. You obviously will have to be cognizant and aware of what that particular MLS is doing as far as time frame is concerned. The new policy does not change an MLS's local mandatory submission deadline or the clear cooperation policy and its requirement to file a listing with the MLS within 1 business day from public marketing. It's a little bit misleading, because interestingly enough, under this multiple listing option for sellers, the individual listing broker can actually do marketing on their social media, on their own website, not through an IDX feed, but on their own website with a sign in the front yard. They can do those things even though they are public marketing. So it's not just making it available to the participants and subscribers. It is actually reaching out to the general public through these other means. However, if they do decide to do those type things, put it on their website, do some kind of social media marketing, or put signs in the front yard, it is going to trigger clear cooperation, and it is going to require them to be in the MLS. So again, it's not one or the other, you guys. All of these things are working in conjunction with one another, and that's what's important to keep in mind. So if you're going to have options as a seller, and we actually are going to be dealing with this in the forms committee. Last forms committee, we decided to put together an addendum to the 1106. So currently, we have in our exclusive right to sell listing agreement, we have a provision for delayed marketing. That's going to come out of 1106 and show up on an addendum instead. And on the addendum, we're going to address all of these possibilities for any kind of delayed marketing. So if you have no delayed marketing, then you're just going into the MLS, right? It's going to be available to all of the subscribers and participants. It's going to go out through the IDX feed. So it's showing up on everybody's website. It's going out through syndication to all these public facing websites. So that's full blown marketing, right? Is what's happening. And so you will not use the addendum in the event that that's what you're doing. But in the event that you're deciding to do something other than full blown marketing, then the addendum will address the various options available, because part of the requirement under this new seller option rule is that the seller is being kind of informed, and the disclosure is being made about kind of the benefits of marketing through the MLS. And they are making a very, very informed decision as to whether or not they want to be, want their listings syndicated to all of these public facing websites or not. So they're going to have to make there's going to have to be a disclosure, and then there's going to have to be the seller signing off that indeed they do not want all of their listing going out to these public facing websites. So the option for office exclusive exempt listing under this new policy is that you'll have this period of time for office exclusive period. And like I said, that period of time will vary from MLS to MLS as far as how long it can remain in that status. And again, it means that it will be marketed and available for all of the participants and subscribers, but again, not to the public-facing websites. No syndication, nothing is being pushed out to these other websites when you're in that period of time. Now, in the event that you, just like in Clear Cooperation, in the event that you should do some kind of public marketing of the property, then it is going to have to be available in the MLS within 1 business day of putting any kind of signs and things like that in the front yard. And then at that point, the advertisement will be pushed out through IDX and syndication. Okay, so if you're in an office exclusive period and you start doing public marketing in the property, it will be pushed out. At that point, it will go into a different status. And this is the office exclusive listing, you guys, that is already existing right now under Clear Cooperation. In the event that if you have a seller who decides that they do not want their listing going out to everybody, you can still have an office exclusive exemption, but it's still going to be the trigger is still going to be any kind of public marketing that requires it to go in the MLS. Now, the delayed marketing exemption, which is at the bottom of the screen here, that period of time, the delayed marketing period, is again determined by the MLS, as I said, and it will be available to the subscribers and participants. And then at the point where it comes out of that delayed marketing exempt, it's going to be pushed out to everybody else. So again, you still have the option of an office exclusive listing. So if you don't want to go into the MLS, that's still available to you. But again, because Clear Cooperation is still in play, if you start doing public marketing, you are now going into the MLS, and then it's going to be sent through IDX and syndication out. If you go into this delayed marketing period or exempt listing period under this new rule, then it will remain in that status until such time as either you move it into the next status, which would send it out to all these public facing websites, or in the event that there's a time frame limitation per the MLS, then when that time frame is met, then it will be pushed out to all of these public facing websites and through the IDX feeds to all of the participant and subscribers websites that have IDX feeds. So these are different options that a seller has available to them. Again, I want to go full-blown marketing. I want everything out there from the very beginning. I want to do a delayed marketing, which is at the bottom, which is for some period of time only available to the participants and subscribers in the MLS, but not being sent out to the through IDX and syndication. Or you have the office exclusive provision that says, I don't want to go into the MLS yet, and that's fine, and that's still available as long as you're not doing any public marketing. The minute you start doing public marketing, Clear Cooperation comes into play, and this is the one in the middle, and you're now having to go into the MLS, and it's going to be, and when you put it into the MLS within that 1 business day, you will have the option of designating it as only a delayed marketing. So you could do some public marketing of the property, because under the delayed marketing exemption, strangely enough, you can actually market the property yourself as the listing broker. So you can put a sign in the front yard, you can put it on the social media, you can put it on your own office website when you're in that delayed marketing exempt status. So, the office exclusive, if you take it and you say, well, we're not going to go to the MLS, then you can't do any of those things. But then you could decide from that office exclusive period to go into the delayed marketing exempt listing, so that you are doing those things, putting a sign up, putting advertising on your social media and these kind of things. and that kind of thing during that period of time. And then the final phase of marketing, of course, is that advertisement through IDX and syndication. So again, I think that there's different levels of this, and I probably think for purposes of this chart, the bottom one should have been in the middle, because I would say that that's the next level, is the delayed marketing exempt listing, and then the very least amount of marketing that's being done, of course, is the office exclusive exempt listing, which is just within your market, just within your brokerage. You're not at that point able to market outside of your brokerage. So again, when we're looking at forms, we are going to be creating an addendum for any kind of delayed marketing, because we are going to address this requirement that sellers have written information about these various types of approaches to marketing their property, and that they consent to opt into any kind of exclusion that keeps them out of the MLS, and for the MLS to send their properties everywhere to all the public facing websites. So if they're not going to go full blown like that into marketing of their property, we need to get their written consent, and we need for them to sign off and say that they're in agreement that that's not going to happen. And like I said, it can change. I mean, it can, at any point, obviously you don't have to remain. And like I said, your MLS may very well have a time frame under which you can actually stay in that delayed marketing status before you're required to go into full-blown marketing. Again, that's going to be dependent on the individual MLSs. So you can visit facts.realtor for more information. It answers a lot of questions, because I know there's kind of a lot of confusion about this and how this is going to work in real life. But what I find, like I said, the most interesting about this is when you are in that MLS only kind of marketing status, you can do things that like put a sign in the front yard, and you can advertise on your own social media, and you can do those things in that status, because you are in the MLS. So you're not violating clear cooperation because you are in the MLS. It's just not in the MLS being syndicated everywhere. So I'm trying to recall if I think I might have put something together already that I sent out, but it was about maybe 2 weeks ago that we sent some information out on this. And if you guys are not getting MMAR's notifications, I encourage you again to reach out to MMAR, make sure they have your correct information, so that and make sure that you haven't accidentally opted out of MMAR correspondence, because that happens sometimes for whatever reason. So I think it was about 2 weeks ago or so that we sent something out on this. And again, if you didn't get it, make sure that you're checking in with MMAR and making sure that they have your correct information, so you're not missing out on these notifications as they come out. Zillow responded to this new rule, but I think we've since gotten a little more clarification on what their position is. So at first we thought the beginning in May, Zillow will not publish any listings if it begins public marketing, but is not added to the MLS with an IDX feed within 24 hours. Zillow's CEO has since come out, because I think that was the way that originally everybody understood it. So in other words, and what was kind of frightening about the Zillow response is that the ban would remain for the life of the listing. It would not apply if relisted with another brokerage. But if you, for example, went into the MLS and didn't make it available to, under the IDX feed, because you were in this exempt, marketing status for some period of time, again, available to the subscribers and the participants, but not being sent out to all the public facing websites. Originally, Zillow's position seemed to be that you would never, even once you moved out of that, MLS only marketing status, you would never be able to send listings to Zillow or have them appear on Zillow. Like I said, the CEO of Zillow has since come out, and it appears as though he's clarified that the only time that Zillow is going to take this position is in the event that you keep the listing from the MLS. Now, so going back to our last slide, if you were in that mode of an office exclusive type listing, right here in the middle, you guys, this office exclusive type listing where you're not sharing it with other participants, you're not sharing it with, you're not sending it out through IDX feeds and this kind of thing, that this would trigger Zillow's response, which is, we don't even care if you move out of that particular status and then make it available to MLS participants at some point and then syndicate it at some point. Zillow will not allow you to actually appear on their website later on down the road. It would be a ban that would remain with the listing as long as it was with that brokerage. If that brokerage listing expired and the seller went and relisted with a different brokerage, then Zillow would open it back up again, and it would depend on what that brokerage was doing, right? Again, if they went back into, completely keeping it out of the MLS, then that would be the same kind of fate for them, so to speak. If they just went into the MLS, even if it was just in that seller's choice kind of exempt listing period available to all the MLS participants, then it would be, starting over, wiping the slates clean, so to speak, and Zillow would allow for it on their website whenever it was syndicated. Redfin has since taken the same position as Zillow on this, so they seem to be following suit. And so they're not big fans, obviously, of keeping these listings off the MLS altogether. And they've kind of, I think, this is kind of obviously kind of retaliatory if that's the choice that the seller and the listing broker make, to keep it out of the MLS altogether. This is kind of the fate they will find with Zillow and Redfin. This does seem to be kind of evolving all the time, and more clarity is coming out of it. But that's, I think, where we've landed right now with Zillow's position on this, and I'll keep you posted on that. So as I said, sellers that opt to have their listing exempt under the MLS options for sellers will not get their listings. Now, like I said, that was what we thought was happening kind of initially, but what we have since determined from the CEO's comments is that you can, as long as you're in the MLS, even if you're under the listing options for sellers where it's being, and when I send this out to you guys, I'll fix this slide, because this came about as of last week when I was supposed to be talking to you guys about this. This new development or clarification from the CEO of Zillow has come out since. So at this point, it does appear that you can be in that seller's exempt position. So it's not being syndicated, but it's available to the participants and subscribers. And you will not be retaliated against, for lack of a better word, by Zillow. They're not going to, that's fine for you to be in that status and then go into a syndication status and get your listings available on Zillow and Trulia and Redfin and all that stuff. It's if in the event that you should decide not to put it in the MLS at all, which is where Zillow and Trulia and Redfin are going to be actually prohibiting any future marketing on their platforms. So like I said, these developments are both recent and ongoing, and I will, try to get some updates out to you guys as they develop. But I think the latest, like I said, I think we are clear at this point, clear as mud, that the position is that you can remain in that seller exempt status, and you will not be penalized in any way by Redfin or Zillow or Trulia when you ultimately start syndicating the listing. All right. So the other thing I just wanted to give you an update on, because I've talked about this a lot at my last legal updates over the last couple of years, because there's been a lot of challenges to FinCEN in the court. So as you recall, this requirement under FinCEN was that you had to actually register your beneficial owners in with the federal government. So you had to go to a website. It was a free service. So I talked about in prior updates how if you ever got any notification that there were charges associated with this, or found yourself on a website where they were trying to charge you to do this, that was all actually fraud, and there was a lot of fraud going on. But there was constant challenges to this requirement that you, as an LLC or corporation, actually go to their website and fill out the information regarding the beneficial owners of the LLC or the corporation. And those challenges seem to have kind of shaken out to say that at least the interim, and we say interim final rule because it is, again, seems to be ever changing, is that that you're not required to anybody who has been organized, any LLC or corporation that has been organized within the United States, and they do define what that means, but I think it's pretty obvious. If you are not a foreign reporting company, then you are actually exempt from having to register your beneficial owners under FinCEN. So some of you might have already gone out and already done this. No harm, no foul. But in the event that you haven't, and you've been watching this and wondering how it was going to play out before you actually went to the website and registered, you are no longer required to do so. if you are a domestic reporting company, meaning you've been organized under laws of the state of in the United States. We also have some new independent contractor rules that came out effective as of March 11th, and it replaces the 2021 rule with what we call a totality of the circumstances test. So under this independent contractor analysis, there's no single factor in controlling. The economic reality governs whether the analysis of whether or not an individual is a independent contractor or whether or not they are a employee. And the focus is whether or not the worker is economically dependent on the employer or in business for themselves. That's tough when you own a brokerage because all of your associate brokers obviously have to be affiliated with a qualifying broker, and of course the qualifying broker is the brokerage, right? So it's a difficult position. You guys are in a really tough spot as QBs because you are charged with supervising to some extent, right, the actions of the associate broker, but at the same time, they are independent contractors. And if you have too much control or exercise too much control over associate brokers, then all of a sudden they start looking like employees opposed to independent contractors. And that's a real problem. It's not only just a problem for the Department of Labor, because of course employees, you withhold taxes, you pay employer taxes for them, you have workers' comp requirements, all of those things that go along with having employees. But also the thing that happens with employees is liability. And there's actually a brokerage right now down in Albuquerque, and their associate broker was out driving around and got into an accident, and they were out doing business for the brokerage. They were, I can't recall if they were looking for houses for a buyer or if they were going to, open an open house for their seller. But they got into an accident, and the plaintiff, who was the injured party in that accident, actually named the brokerage in the lawsuit. Claiming that the brokerage, not only the brokerage, but because this has become a big thing now in this world of independent contractor versus employee, the team that the broker was on, both the brokerage and the team were named in the lawsuit, and both of them were charged, or the claim is that they were responsible for this broker's actions, what they alleged to be negligent actions in this car accident, because they were under basically laws of what we call respondent superior, which is the relationship or the obligations and liabilities associated with an employee-employer relationship. That was the exact basis of the claims against both the brokerage and the team that this person was on. There was a team leader who was named. So this issue of independent contractor and employee, it's an ongoing kind of battle to define these lines. So there's a couple of different federal laws that come into play. And what I was referring to there a minute ago was state law. That's what this lawsuit was about. It was under state law. But going back to what I was talking about, the changes in the regulations, there's two separate federal laws that come into play. There's the IRS laws and regulations, right? When those specifically deal with tax purposes. So are you an independent contractor or an employee for tax purposes, going back to, do I have to pay employee taxes? Do I have to maintain certain workers' comp things and these kind of things? And then there's the Department of Labor under the Fair Labor Standards Act for have benefits and protections for employees. So recently, the FLSA updated its criteria for analyzing and classifying individuals as either independent contractors or employees. It's important that brokerages perform an analysis under both IRS and FLSA standards, as an individual could be an employer for FLSA standards, even if they are considered an independent contractor for tax purposes. So this kind of ongoing analysis has to be done under two different federal laws under the federal umbrella. It's also, again, important to do this analysis on a regular basis because of what can happen from a liability standpoint. So for independent contractors, there's 6 factors that they look at quite frequently. Opportunity for profit or loss based on managerial skill. So can the worker affect earnings through business decisions? Unfortunately, that very well is possible as an associate broker working for a brokerage. Investment by the worker versus the company. Has the worker made business-like investments? More often than not, for associate brokers, they're investing in their own business, not in the brokerage, right? So they're doing things to benefit their own end game, and not necessarily the brokerage as a whole. The brokerage may be doing advertising and things like that for the brokerage, but the worker is not doing those things for the brokerage. Permanence of the working relationship. Is the relationship ongoing, or is it project based? Well, that's kind of a little bit of both in an associate broker capacity, right? You have an ongoing relationship with the associate brokers as a qualifying broker and brokerage, but it's definitely project based. It's every single sale, right, and every single transaction. Control over the work performed in the schedule. Does the worker control their schedule and work methods? This is where a lot of, interestingly enough, it used to be QBs who were getting in trouble for this, and now it's team leads. Has been the big focus over the last 5 years or so. How much are you trying to control what your associate brokers are doing? Are you mandating that they come to meetings? Are you mandating that they do floor time? Are you mandating that they do certain, and I'm not talking about the requirements they're required, they must meet under the real estate commission regulations, but are you as a brokerage requiring them to take certain classes and attend certain things? So the more control that you exercise over an associate broker, the more it looks like an employee relationship opposed to an independent contractor relationship. And that's true for teams as well. Like I said, they've become kind of the new qualifying broker, because teams will have a lot of strict requirements over how everybody on their team what they have to do and how they have to do it. And the more that the team does that, the more likely the team leader will end up in this situation. Integral nature of the work to the business. Is the work central to the company's business? Well, yes, of course it is. In the case of associate brokers, scale and initiative required for the work. Does the worker use specialized skills independently? And I think we can safely say that yes, they do. So you can see where we have a lot of kind of gray area, or arguably gray area, in terms of associate broker and brokerage or qualifying brokerage relationship when you look at those criteria. So opportunity for profit or loss depending on managerial skill. The first one, a worker is considered an independent contractor if they exercise managerial skill that affects the worker's economic success or failure, performing the work such as setting their rates, choosing their clients, their schedules, marketing their services, or making business decisions like hiring or purchasing equipment. You can all, as we kind of walk through these, I won't go into, examples, but you guys can see how, there's a little bit of both and everything in some of, or at least in a lot of these. If a worker simply takes assignments, works set hours, has no control over business growth or costs, they are most likely an employee. Okay, so those are things to stay away from. Investments by the worker and the potential employer. A worker is more likely to be an independent contractor if they make capital or entrepreneurial investments and support an independent business, such as purchasing equipment, renting space, or marketing their services. I think associate brokers are all, always marketing their services independently. If the worker relies on the employer for tools, equipment, client acquisition, and other minor personal investments, they are likely an employee. And going back to the team thing, this client acquisition situation, a lot of times the team will have leads that they give out, and the associate brokers or the team members on that team are reliant on the team leader to kind of give out, so to speak, or assign these leads. Again, you guys, this is the stuff that gets you into trouble under these laws. The degree of performance of the work relationship. A worker is likely an employee if their work relationship is indefinite, continuous, and exclusive to one employer. Again, you can see how we get into a real, kind of push and pull on this, because, real estate commission regulations specifically say that an associate broker can only be affiliated with one qualifying broker. So, while, other independent contractors, anybody, your copy, machine guy who fixes your copy machine or fills your water jug, or, even us as attorneys may be able to, do work for other employers. Associate brokers cannot. They can only be affiliated with one qualifying broker. So again, we really are kind of walking in a gray area where people can make the arguments that they continue to make. If the worker has a project-based, sporadic, or non-exclusive arrangement and market their services to multiple businesses, they are more likely an independent contractor. The nature and degree of control, I talked about this. A worker is likely an employee if the employer controls their schedule, supervises their work, restricts them from working elsewhere, or sets prices in economic terms. If the worker operates independently, setting their own schedule, prices, client base without supervision or restrictions, but beyond those that are required by state law or regulations, they are more likely an independent contractor. Again, the more control that you exert over the individual, the more likely it is that that individual will be considered an employee opposed to an independent contractor. The extent to which the work is performed is an integral part of the potential employer's business. If the worker's role is critical, necessary, or central to the employer's business, they are likely an employee. If the work is supplementary and not essential to the core business, the worker is more likely an independent contractor. Again, that's a tough one, you guys, because we all know that, a brokerage is completely dependent on their, obviously on their associate brokers in the business that they do. Skill and initiative. A worker is likely an employee if they rely on employer-provided training and do not apply specialized skills independently. If they use their expertise to generate business, market their services, and secure work without employer direction, they are more likely an independent contractor. Randomly, my screen will work when I hit a button, and then it doesn't. How does this compare to the IRS and New Mexico law as far as independent contractor versus employee status? So the IRS, the general rule is that an individual is an independent contractor if the person for whom the services are performed has the right to control and direct only the results of the work and not what will be done and how it will be done. So this is where we're trying to get to. You just get there, right? I only care about what's happening at the end. I'm not going to tell you how to get there. That's for the IRS. What we were talking about is fair labor standards a few minutes ago. Under New Mexico law is similar in that whether an individual is or is not an independent contractor depends on the right to control. The relationship of the employer and employee usually results where there's a control over physical details such as the manner and method of performance of the contract. On the other hand, where control is limited to the ultimate results to be achieved under the contract, the relationship is usually that of an independent contractor. So how can you what can you do as qualifying brokers, as owners of brokerages to try to maintain that independent contractor status, not just so you don't violate the labor rules and the IRS rules, but also so that you limit potential liability for yourself for things like I just described with the auto accident. Use clear independent contractors agreements that are very clear that if you're an independent contractor, not an employee. Specify independent contractor status under federal tax law. Limit payment to commissions only, not hourly rates and things like that. Require brokers to cover their own business expenses, their license fees, their dues, their equipment. Make sure they're handling their own work tools, their cars, their phones, their computers. Those aren't things that the brokerage is providing for them. Avoid exerting excessive control, like office hours, meetings, dress codes, those kind of things. Only provide oversight as required by New Mexico law. And then, if you're not sure, if you want to implement something in the office and you're wondering, gosh, is this going to create problems under, either the federal laws or potential liability if somebody should sue us, talk to your attorney, you guys. Ask those questions in advance. I mean, I can't tell you, I've got a father-in-law who does commercial development or did commercial development over in Gallup for years. And he was used to doing everything with a handshake. And when things went wrong, he would always reach out to me afterwards and say, how do I fix this? And I said, well, if you'd come to me first, we probably could have dealt with this. It would have been a lot easier to deal with. So don't make your move and then talk to your attorney. Talk to your attorney and then make your move. Important that you're getting some guidance on this stuff ahead of time. And again, not just so you're in compliance with the federal laws that we just discussed, but also so that you avoid liability for lawsuits, again, like the one that I was just discussing. So here are some websites that look kind of jumbled here. I'll fix that as well before I make it available to everybody because it kind of runs on. But there's some websites that you can go to get some additional information on independent contractor status and how to maintain that. Okay, so I just want to talk to you. I think I'm probably out of time almost. I am always have more to share with you than I have time to share. But I just want to say independent consideration. This is something we're dealing with at the Forms Committee right now. Contract formation. What does it take to create a contract? You have to have an offer, you have to have acceptance, and you have to have consideration. Now, it's very typical that brokers think that earnest money is consideration in a contract. That's not what it is in a sale and purchase agreement. Typically, the consideration is the promise of the seller to sell to the buyer and the promise of the buyer to sell to the seller. I mean, to buy from the seller. Okay. So those are mutual promises that they make to one another in the contract. And that's actually the consideration, not the earnest money. The earnest money is just another term of the contract. And that's why if earnest money isn't delivered, you send out a 2-day notice to cure under the residential purchase agreement. It's just another term of the contract. Valid consideration for contract formation requires a bargained for exchange where a promise is given by one party to a contract in return for performance or a return promise from the other party. Okay, so you have to have consideration or you don't even have a contract. In Texas and California, contracts for real estate are often treated as option contracts. And if the buyer can walk away under multiple contingencies, their promise is illusory, what we call illusory. But what it means is I really didn't promise anything. Yes, the seller has promised to sell, but the buyer didn't really promise to buy because they can walk away for all of these reasons, right? We've got inspections, we've got their own observations of the property, and we have appraisals, and we have financing, and we have surveys, and we have lots of ways that the buyer can walk away. So if indeed we determine that the buyer has not given anything, the promise is illusory because they really haven't promised anything because they have so many outs, then it compromises the validity of the contract. And the argument is that we don't have a contract at all, actually, because we don't have binding obligations on both sides. So we don't have an enforceable contract. So, for example, and I'm sure this is the case law from other states, is that, if a seller wanted to turn around and sell a property to some other buyer, they would make the argument that there really was no consideration given to the buyer, the first buyer, and therefore the seller doesn't have to honor the terms because there's really no contract. And that's where the independent consideration comes in. So independent consideration is something of value given to support an option or contract separate from the main performance or promise. It must be real, bargained for, and not illusory. So it's not just a promise to do what they are already obligated to do. A number of years ago, I introduced the idea of the TOM fee into our residential purchase agreement. And the idea of the TOM fee was that it was twofold, actually. One of it was the fact that we were going to be compensating the seller for taking their property off the market, and if indeed they wanted to take the property, if they wanted compensation for that. We didn't go so far as to say that they wouldn't take the property off the market if a TOM fee wasn't paid, but we gave the option of that. And one of the reasons we called it a TOM fee is because you heard all the time from sellers when their property was off the market for 2 or 3 weeks, and then the buyer walked away for whatever reason, inspections, appraisal, surveys, whatever the case may be, and they got all their earnest money back. You would hear the seller say, but I had my property off the market for 3 weeks, and where's my compensation for that? And so the TOM fee was an ability to get the seller compensated if that's what the parties negotiated. It was never a requirement. And as much as I kind of wanted it to be used and kind of moving in that direction for some kind of independent consideration, not just the promise of the buyer to buy, which again is arguably illusory, it didn't necessarily stick or take off. So we actually are at the forms committee level, and the very first form that we're working on this right now is the farm and ranch purchase agreement, and then the vacant land purchase agreement, and then the residential purchase agreement. The idea that there needs to be some independent consideration beyond the earnest money given to the seller that belongs to the seller and doesn't go back to the buyer. And again, the reason that we are moving in this direction is because, in my opinion, it will only be a matter of time before our courts take the same position as the Texas court and the California courts. It's only a matter of time before they say that our contracts, which have so many outs for a buyer, actually don't create any promise on the part of the buyer, and there's actually no contract. So when we introduce this independent consideration into our contracts, there's not going to be, there's not going to be a specific dollar amount that's going to be dictated. We are going to have a default amount. So in the event that they don't put anything in there, I think our default amount, I don't recall, but I think it might have been, I don't know if it was $10 or $100, but it was some default amount, but there'll be a space where you guys can put something else in there, but it can't be zero. It has to be something. And that money would be paid with the earnest money. But it is money that the parties are agreeing in advance would go to the seller, regardless of what happens with the buyer, regardless of whether they back out and get their earnest money back. That money goes to the seller. And the question is, or the reason or rationale behind this is we don't want a challenge to the form or the contract, because if, there was a case I talked about a long time ago, you guys, where somebody sued the association because the association had promulgated a form and the consumer claimed that the form didn't protect them. And the court said in response to that, there was no case against the association that promulgated or created the forms for the use by the brokers, just like we do it, because the association didn't require the brokers to use the form. The association wasn't part of that contract. So they didn't find that the association had any liability in that scenario. But the court very clearly stated to the consumer who felt like they were injured by the contract that they could pursue legal action against their broker who had presented that contract to them and encouraged them to use it. So we don't want that to happen to you guys. We don't want there to be a challenge and somebody say, my broker said I should use this MR form. This MR form didn't protect me. The seller sold to somebody else. And when I tried to challenge that, the court said I didn't even have a contract. We don't want that to happen. We don't want it to happen to the consumers, and we don't want it to happen to you as brokers. So we are moving in the direction of this independent consideration, and the intent is that it will replace the TOM fee. And the way it'll differ from the TOM fee is the fact that it will not be an option. There will have to be some independent consideration, because again, we do foresee that this is the way our courts would find as well. Just a couple more slides, you guys, then I'm going to let you go. I don't know, this came up at the Forms Committee the other day, and it was like a revelation for me because I didn't realize that brokers didn't know this. So we are trying to do a better job at getting the word out. So irrigation wells are utilized for areas of greater than 1 acre, and they fall under what we call prior use laws, which is water law in New Mexico. Irrigation wells have an associated water right on file with the New Mexico Office of State Engineer. So I know that this term irrigation well gets thrown around a lot when you're selling properties, but it's only an irrigation well if it has an associated water right on file with the New Mexico Office of the State Engineer. If you already own water rights in the state of New Mexico, or if somebody purchases a property with water rights, they may obtain an irrigation well drilling permit because they have water rights or they're buying a piece of property with water rights. But if there are no water rights associated with the well, you guys, it's just a domestic well. It's just another domestic, maybe it's two, maybe you already have a domestic well and then you have another well and you think, oh, that's an irrigation well. If there is not an associated water right on file with the Office of State Engineer's office, it's not an irrigation well. It's just another domestic well. So we're doing a little bit better of educating and covering that in the new forms. A couple quick things I'll say about some bills that David mentioned. SB 267, like David said, requiring owners to provide notice to dwelling unit applicants. So those of you who do any kind of property management, I've got an article I've written about this. I'm going to send it over to MR to get it out to you guys in the next couple of days. So if you're a property manager, watch for it. It requires owners to return an applicant screening fee in certain circumstances. It requires owners to provide notice of fee increases. It reduces the limit on late fees, and it expands private remedies, declaring an unfair or deceptive trade practice if a property manager does take more than they're allowed to, because it's a $50 cap on screening fees. And again, if they don't return it under certain circumstances. So watch for that article that I'm going to send out if you do any kind of property management in your brokerage. Quick forms update. We are working on the farm and ranch purchase agreement, followed by the vacant land purchase agreement. These forms have not been worked on in, such a long time, you guys. So I know they need a lot of work, and we've got a great subcommittee that's been working on these, and the forms committee has been working so hard on them. And so we are actually moving these forward to get some revisions to these. And I think you're going to love those. Next on the agenda is our residential resale purchase agreement. Not this year. We're not probably going to get it out, but what we are moving towards in the residential resale purchase agreement is two things. Number one, more of a global due diligence period. So those of you who do commercial work and are more familiar with the commercial form and kind of this global due diligence, instead of having multiple deadlines for everything, having one big deadline for a lot of things, not everything, because not everything can fit into that. But to the extent that things can be covered in one deadline, that's the direction that this is going. All of these actually are going. And in addition to that, trying to get some of the things out of the residential PA that are not applicable to every transaction, so like manufactured housing, wells, septics, HOAs, things. And I don't know exactly what's coming out and what's not, but there'll be a trigger, kind of a line in the PA that if this applies, go to this addendum. If this applies, go to this addendum. They do this up in Washington, and it's funny, they have a much shorter PA. Now, of course, if you have a property with a whole bunch of addenda, you're back up to as many pages as we have. But if you don't, if you're not using all of these different addendum because it doesn't apply to the property, then you're dealing with a much shorter purchase agreement. So we are moving in the direction of that on all of these forms. I am, like I said, going to be doing an addendum for the delayed marketing in the listing agreement. So watch for that. That should be coming out. We have a meeting next month, and then I'll get that to them and approved, and then to the EC. So in plenty of time for the deadline in September. So watch for that. We have some major revisions to our real estate contract addendum, our 2402, that it will be coming out, working on some revisions to our referral agreement. We're creating compensation agreements. So mostly for when buyers and sellers have found each other and want you to put the deal together, how you're going to get compensated. We don't have a perfect form for that. We're working on that. Property management and commercial forms are both being worked on right now. We have 2 subcommittees for property management and for the commercial group. I've been working with Carnum on those. And so we're trying to get some of those done as well. If you guys are interested in any of that, you can certainly let me know or let Amanda know. And if you want to jump in and join any of those committees. This is the legal hotline number, legal hotline address. If you guys have questions on what I was talking about today, feel free to give me a call. Again, watch for some additional information on these topics that will be coming out from NMAR. I'm sure I've gone way over my time. I greatly appreciate you guys sticking with me, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. David, do you have anything else to say?
Nothing else. Rob, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, well, thank you all for being here. We did go a little bit over time, but I think it was great information. Thanks, Ashley. The independent contractor stuff I know has been on the horizon for years, and be careful with that stuff out there. Anyway, thanks again. If you need anything from any of us, get in touch as soon as you can, and our doors and our phones are always ready to handle you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.